There is a specific kind of physical whiplash that hits your hands the moment you pick up a heavy weapon in an older hunting game today. You press the button to dodge, you try to launch yourself into the air to close the gap, and your hunter just rolls sluggishly in the dirt. That sudden feeling of being glued to the floor is the exact moment you realize how thoroughly Capcom rewired our brains. We spent years accepting that hunting giant monsters meant deliberate, slow, punishing movements. We accepted that committing to an attack meant planting your feet and praying the beast did not turn around. Then this game arrived and handed us glowing bugs on a string, completely shattering every single rule we thought the series was built on. Sitting here in 2026, it is fascinating to see how a game originally designed for a portable console ended up fundamentally changing action combat. We are looking at a title that polarized the hardcore community at launch, yet somehow aged into a mechanical masterpiece. The defining feature, the absolute core of the entire experience, is pure, unadulterated movement. The wire bug is not just a grappling hook you use to swing across canyons, it is an extension of your weapon, your dodge roll, and your combo strings all rolled into one constantly regenerating resource. Before this, you were essentially playing chess with giant fire-breathing dinosaurs. You had to predict where a Rathalos would land and stand exactly in that spot. Now, you're playing a high-speed fighting game. If a monster knocks you back, you do not hit the ground and wait for a recovery animation. You use a wire fall to instantly catch your balance in midair and launch a diving counterattack right back at the monster's skull. That single mechanic fundamentally altered the pacing of a hunt. It made mistakes far less punishing, but the developers knew this, so they cranked the monster aggression up. They will knock you into the sky, wait for you to wirefall in the wrong direction, and swat you out of the air like a fly. But the mobility absolutely did not stop at the glowing bugs, because we have to talk about the dogs. The introduction of Palamutes felt like such an obvious addition in hindsight that it's crazy we walked everywhere on foot for 15 years. Having a canine companion that you can jump on without breaking your stride, sharpen your massive sword while riding, and drift around corners completely removed the boring downtime of tracking. You are always moving, always engaged, always heading straight for the action. The map design reflected this massive shift perfectly. These are not flat, disconnected arenas separated by loading screens. They are massive, vertical playgrounds filled with hidden shrines, abandoned ruins, and towering cliffs that you can literally run straight up. The sheer freedom of exploration in the shrine ruins feels liberating. You are encouraged to scale the highest peaks just to see what's hiding up there, usually rewarded with rare endemic life that permanently boosts your health for the hunt. Once you actually engage the monster, the combat system reveals a layer of depth that initially feels completely overwhelming, but quickly becomes second nature. Every single one of the 14 weapon types received a massive overhaul through the Switch skill system. This was an absolute stroke of brilliance. It allowed you to swap out the core moves of your weapon to tailor it completely to your own personal playstyle. Do you want your dual blades to focus on grounded, rapid slashes, or do you want to turn into a human buzzsaw that launches into the sky and grinds down the monster's spine? You get to choose. The greatsword, traditionally the slowest weapon in gaming history, was suddenly given moves that let you seamlessly parry incoming attacks and instantly transition into your strongest charge slash. This level of granular customization meant that two players using the exact same weapon could have entirely different combat loops. It kept the gameplay remarkably fresh because you could always just swap a skill and relearn your approach. I have to take a second to mention what they did to the hunting horn, because it remains one of the most controversial but genuinely fascinating redesigns in the franchise. For years, it was an incredibly niche weapon, basically a clunky musical instrument you awkwardly hit monsters with while desperately trying to remember complex note combinations. This game threw all of that out the window and turned it into an aggressive, breakdancing beatdown machine. The notes practically play themselves as you attack, throwing out massive buffs automatically while you smash the monster's face with literal shockwaves of sound. Hardcore purists absolutely hated it, claiming it stripped away all the complexity and identity of the weapon. But suddenly, everyone in the lobbies was playing the hunting horn. Looking back now from a 2026 perspective, it is crystal clear this was a massive experiment in accessibility. They took the highest barrier of entry weapon and made it purely about rhythm and relentless aggression. It worked beautifully. All of this frantic action takes place in and around Kimura Village, and from an art direction standpoint, it is absolutely stunning. The heavy Japanese folklore aesthetic permeates every single aspect of the base game, tying everything together in a neat, beautiful package. You are not just a random nameless hunter, you are the beloved protector of a tight-knit community facing an impending calamity. The village itself feels incredibly alive, filled with characters who actually seem to care about each other. Hinoa and Minato are constantly eating or painting in the background. The music in Chimera is a beautiful, serene vocal track that instantly lowers your real-life blood pressure the moment you return from a chaotic hunt. And the food is legendary. You do not eat massive, greasy meat platters here. You eat colorful dango prepared by a hyperactive chef in a ridiculously charming cinematic. The cohesive, bright theme makes the base game feel incredibly grounded in its own unique, joyful culture. This rich folklore theme directly translated to the monster design, which is arguably the strongest aspect of the entire base experience. The new monsters were heavily inspired by classic Japanese yokai, ghosts, and demons. You have Oxonum, a giant crane that folds its wings to look exactly like a terrifying umbrella monster. You have Gosharag, an absolutely terrifying yeti that creates massive blades of ice on its arms and slowly walks towards you like a slasher movie villain. And then there is Magnamalo. The flagship monster is a massive, heavily armored, tiger-like beast cloaked in cursed, explosive purple hellfire. Your first actual encounter with him is a genuine reality check. He moves with an erratic, explosive speed that demands you master your wirebug mobility just to survive. The monster artificial intelligence here is incredibly sharp. They actively track you. They have massive turf wars with each other, triggering huge cinematic battles where you just sit back and watch the carnage from the sidelines. Not everything in the base game was universally loved, and any honest discussion has to address the massive, roaring elephant in the room, the Rampage. The game's story relentlessly hyped up this massive horde of monsters attacking the village, and the gameplay translated this epic threat into a literal tower defense mode. You run around a muddy arena placing ballistas and cannons, occasionally jumping down into the fray before scrambling frantically back to a turret because the gate is taking damage. It was a bold attempt to break up the standard hunting formula. The glaring problem was that it just wasn't what people bought a monster hunting game for. We wanted to fight legendary beasts one-on-one, not shoot them with an automated machine gun from a wooden platform. It felt chaotic, messy, and forced. It's incredibly telling that the developers completely abandoned the Rampage mode when the expansion finally dropped. It was a definitive failure. Speaking of that expansion, if the base game was a fantastic foundation with a few noticeable cracks, Sunbreak was the absolute masterclass in how to build on top of it. It took the training weights entirely off. We left the peaceful Japanese village and traveled to Elgato, a bustling outpost bathed in Western Gothic horror. Suddenly, the yokai influences were completely gone, replaced by terrifying monsters inspired by classic cinema monsters, like a brutal werewolf and an aristocratic vampire dragon named Malzeno. The tonal shift was jarring in the absolute best way possible. The difficulty curve aggressively spiked. Sunbreak introduced the switch skill swap, allowing you to carry two completely different sets of weapon moves and switch between them on the fly mid-combo while dodging. If the base game was a high-speed fighting game, Sunbreak turned it into a hyperkinetic, stylish character action game. The skill ceiling completely disappeared into the stratosphere, leaving hardcore players rejoicing. One of the most revolutionary additions in Sunbreak, and something that clearly paved the way for the future of the entire genre, was the follower system. For the very first time, you could take major story characters out on master rank hunts with you as fully functioning AI companions, and they were actually helpful. They would actively heal you when you were low, set clever traps, ride other monsters into battle, and hold their own in a brutal fight.
For players who strongly preferred solo hunting, this was a massive revelation. It made the world feel incredibly dynamic, and the constant banter between the characters added a layer of personality and charm. It completely bridged the massive gap between the lonely feeling of playing alone and the chaotic, unpredictable fun of multiplayer. It changed solitary play forever. When we talk about how an action RPG ages, we have to talk deeply about the endgame loop, because that is where the hardcore players spend hundreds of hours. The anomaly investigations introduced in Sunbreak provided an almost infinite, grueling treadmill of content. Classic monsters were infected with blood-sucking parasites, turning their damage output and speed up to absolutely terrifying levels. In return for miraculously beating them, you got exclusive materials to engage in curious crafting. This wild system let you randomly augment your armor and weapons, rolling the dice for better stats or entirely new game-breaking skills. It was pure, unfiltered slot machine gambling with your hard-earned monster materials. On one hand, it allowed for absolutely insane, unprecedented build variety. On the other hand, the randomness could be agonizingly cruel. You could spend 10 exhausting hours grinding just to roll a massive stat penalty. It was an exhausting, fiercely addictive loop that kept the player base heavily engaged. Looking at the game right now from a purely technical perspective in 2026, it is a fascinating case study in brilliant optimization. We have to constantly remember this game originally launched on the older, underpowered Nintendo Switch. Running on Capcom's incredibly versatile engine, it is nothing short of a technical miracle that it ran as smoothly as it did on that older handheld hardware. When you play it on a modern machine today, the stylized art direction heavily carries the slightly lower fidelity environmental textures. The environments feel brilliantly clean and readable. You never lose track of a chaotic fight because a random bush is blocking your camera angle. The sound design is equally crisp and impactful. The fleshy, heavy thud of a giant hammer connecting with a skull, the sharp, metallic sound of a perfect counter, and the sweeping orchestral tracks during intense boss fights are all mixed to perfection. The vocal hunting tracks still give me massive goosebumps. So why exactly does this specific game still matter to us so much in 2026? We have much newer games now. We have heavier graphical showcases and deeply immersive, slow-paced survival mechanics. But this title offers something that the modern generation of games desperately often forgets: pure, unadulterated, arcade-like fun. It absolutely does not waste a single second of your time. You log in, you eat your dango, you jump on your dog, and within 45 seconds, you are locked in a spectacular deathmatch with a giant, fire-breathing beast. It distills the entire hunting formula down to its most chaotic, adrenaline-fueled essence. It's the exact game you boot up when you just want to hit something really hard and feel like an absolute superhero. When you look at the entire massive package, you are looking at one of the most content-rich, mechanically dense, and purely enjoyable action games ever created. It pushed boundaries, broke rules, and undeniably changed the trajectory of the genre. For its unmatched combat fluidity, its incredible monster roster, and the sheer volume of high-quality content, I give this classic a rock-solid 4.5 out of 5. If you enjoyed this look back at a true modern classic, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, share this with a friend, and drop a comment below. Keep playing, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.